Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea and welcome to the first episode of In Conversation with YWLC, where we share insights on topics like career, mental health, wellness, and many more. If you don't already know, YWLC is a volunteer-run organization aimed at nurturing young women in Singapore in their personal and professional lives. So if you want to join our growing community, do check the description below to find out more. Today, we will be talking more about the do's and don'ts to land a 9-to-5 job that you want. I was once there 1 to 2 years ago and felt super lost with no mentorship, no guidance. So what exactly are these important tips to landing the job that you want? We've invited two wonderful ladies with deep expertise on leveling up your career. So welcome Gladys and Kai Ning. Maybe you could share a little bit more about yourselves and also what you do.
Maybe I can start. My name is Kai Ning, and I'm one of the co-founders of CareerSocius. It is a social enterprise in Singapore aimed to help job seekers to maximize their career potential. Typically, we do personal branding workshops and one-to-ones, but we also move up and down the value chain in that we help people with career development as well as career discovery. So we think that career is like a circle. We start off by discovering who we are and what we want to do, and then figure out how do we get to where we want to go. And finally, we start to kind of develop ourselves and improve ourselves throughout our careers to maximize our career potential. And my other hat is that I'm a co-founder of the Courage Chapter. It's quite similar in thread, but what we do is to help senior professionals instead to find employment, especially in their second chapter.
Understand. How about you, Gladys?
Oh, that's great. So Kai Ning has a really wonderful introduction. So hi everyone, my name is Gladys and I currently run CareerWareer, which I co-founded to help job seekers level up in their job search journeys, enhance their personal branding, and basically make companies say yes to them, right? So that's for CareerWareer. And last year I had the privilege to actually co-author a career book called Before the Good Things Come, which is actually a collection of interviews from 25 senior professionals on how young and mid-career professionals can level up in their career journeys. So I also have a day job. I started my career in a bank and then moved into a tech company. And now I'm actually working in the telco industry. So very excited to be here on the podcast to also share a bit more about how young working professionals can level up, not just in the job search, right, but also in their careers on the whole. Because like what Kai Ning pointed out very rightly, careers are cyclical. There'll be ups and downs. So it is very important to develop that resilience, right, and also that enthusiasm in terms of thinking about our careers from a holistic perspective. So definitely very excited to be here. And thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for sharing. But fun fact, if you guys aren't already aware, actually both of them already knew each other before this podcast. And when we reached out to both of them, we didn't know that they were actually friends before this. So maybe you guys could share a little bit more about how you guys even met, and was it like social media or like in real life?
Yeah, I think definitely happy to share more, and maybe Kai Ning can jump in later. So when I wanted to start CareerWareer back in early 2021, actually, I realized that there weren't actually many of such, like services and offerings in the space. And I just went on LinkedIn, which is a very important social networking tool, which I'm happy to talk about more later. And I found that, Kai Ning was already running CareerSocius with her group of friends, and they were doing a lot of great work in the space. So I actually reached out to Kai Ning on LinkedIn, just messaging her and hey, Kai Ning, I saw that you started CareerSocius. What got you to do this? And she was very nice, right, with her time. She actually offered to jump on a call with me, and I think that was how it actually got started.
And I think we became friends afterwards. We met up a couple of times for coffee and for dinner.
Okay.
And I think because we are in a similar space, we could learn from each other quite a bit. I also chatted with her, and then she also taught me, what's the pricing model, all these things. So I think it's really cool because it's quite rare to find kind of common-minded business people together that wants to do good for society. Yeah, so it was really nice.
Wow, that's nice. So you mentioned earlier that she has been doing CareerSocius for a while now, and I saw when I stalked your LinkedIn, Kai Ning, that you have been doing it since the start of your career, upon the time you graduated. What inspired you to do it at such a young age, actually, right off the bat after graduating, really wanting to do this CareerSocius services?
Right. So I studied HR in university. I took an internship in an external recruitment firm, right? So that was my first ever internship. I would like to say that my bubble of an idealistic world was burst actually during that one internship, because it was there where I realized that there's actually quite like some discrimination hidden behind the scenes in Singapore and in the rest of the world. It's just very inevitable because recruiters are people and companies are also made out of people, right? And I also realized that a lot of people, if they didn't have a great start to their career or to their life, they find it very, very difficult to move up the career ladder at some point. And at some point, they've hit the ceiling and they don't know how to further their job prospects. And I was thinking, since I graduated in HR, right, is there something that I can do, a small thing that I can do that is easier for us to kickstart, but also to help the rest of Singaporeans? So we started off by listing our resume services on Carousel. It was like super lame. And sometimes we wanted to do it for free somehow, but in the end, we realized that free things people don't appreciate. So we started to charge a little bit. And that's how we got started. Slowly, we progressed to niching down on young professionals and youth at risk rather than general Singapore population, because we felt that we were young people. We should value add to the young people and we are more relatable that way.
That's so inspiring. Did you do this with a group of other people around your age, or how did you meet these people that you co-founded CareerSocius with?
Yeah, so the first person I reached out to was my now fiancé.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I said, please join me. I want to do this.
Well, were you in a relationship then?
Yeah, we were in a relationship. And he was like, okay, fine, I support one of your crazy endeavors, right? And right now we grew our team to around 40 plus volunteers behind the scenes, and all of us specialize in different industries and functions. So I think our value proposition is that no matter what industry or function you come from, we can send you someone who can give you the specific guidance. Yeah, so that's how we got started, and that's where we are now.
That's so diverse, meaning if I'm in finance or tech or FMCG, I always can go back to CareerSocius because there is someone out there that specializes in my industry. So how about you, Gladys? What inspired you to start on your journey with CareerWareer?
I would say that my journey is actually quite different from Kai Ning, right? So I didn't have an epiphany. I didn't wake up with an epiphany, or I didn't have an idea one day I wanted to help people. I think for me, my background was in geography and I spent some time in the bank, right? Before I decided to start CareerWareer. I would say that it actually happened by chance. A friend just approached me to rework her resume, and she got interviews at places that she never thought she would get interviews. And this friend was actually very encouraging. She was like, "Oh, Gladys, you seem to have a flair for storytelling. Have you ever considered, helping people with their resumes just like me?" And at first I was thinking, oh wow, do people even want such a service, right? So I decided to do a very small experiment and test. I just went on my own Facebook and Instagram. At that point in time, TikTok wasn't that big a thing, back in 2021. And I just asked my friends, right? Hey, I'm actually offering resume rework services. Is anybody interested in it? And very interestingly, I think also because at the time it was in 2021, the market was slightly better than now. Interestingly, there were 3 people who responded, and they were just really happy at my final product. And all 3 of them actually encouraged me to start something like that. So yeah, I think that was how CareerWareer actually started. Quite similar to Kai Ning, actually. We didn't have a website and all. It was entirely on social media until I think it reached to a point where we had 10 or 20 clients, and then I decided hey, you know what? Let's do something proper. Let's have a website. Let's think about pricing. Let's think about how we can actually, offer something to people, right? And really make a difference in people's lives, and having companies say yes to people out there who are job searching. So I would say that I mostly, maybe because of the people I meet in the business world, a lot of the people that CareerWareer works with are mainly mid-career professionals who, number one, are looking up to move in their careers, right? Whether it be a promotion or a lateral move, or number 2, they're actually looking to make a career switch. Yeah, so I think that's how, CareerWareer really started. Yeah, quite different from Kai Ning, but we have had many good learnings and experiences.
Okay, so out of curiosity, right, you mentioned that in the past you had to reach out to Facebook. So how has it changed over the times now that people use social media platforms more? There's TikTok, LinkedIn is even more prominent than the past. How has it changed your sort of marketing strategy or promotion strategy when it comes to promoting your CareerWareer page?
Well, I would say that I think for me, the main channels are basically 3. So Instagram, because I'm quite active on Instagram, and a lot of kind of like young and mid-career professionals are on Instagram. The second would actually be like LinkedIn. So I write a lot on like LinkedIn about the job search and careers. And then occasionally, if people find an interest in it, I think they reach out to me on like LinkedIn as well, right? So I think it also helps that, I'm also a LinkedIn like top voice. So I think that helps to build that credibility. And then last but not least would actually be word of mouth, because when you do a good job for people, they refer their friends and their contacts and acquaintances to you as well.
I see. Just curious, could you share how you became LinkedIn top voice? Was there like some prerequisites that you went through?
Actually, to be very honest, I don't know. And I think a lot of people who became LinkedIn top voice, they don't know as well, right? Because LinkedIn does not publicize the criteria, publicly, right? I think because they want to prevent people from gaming the system. But what I've kind of like seen, I think like across all kind of like LinkedIn top voices, where I think first and foremost, number one, consistent engagement on the platform over years. So it's not something that happens like over weeks or months, right? But like years. And then I think second would be that LinkedIn actually value a lot on like thought leadership and actually adding value to the conversation, right? So, every single post, every single content that you put out, right? It cannot be promotional, but it actually has to kind of like add value to your readers, right? And I think that's a very good, entry and talking point to our topic today, right? Which is really about the job search and careers, right? I always think that the one way in which people can make the most progress forward in the job search and careers is actually to think about like the other party, right? So how can you add value to the companies that you want to work for? How can you add value to, like your manager, your colleagues, your stakeholders, right? And I found that when you actually think from that angle, right, about, adding value to your readers, your audience, to, people you're interested to work with, instead of thinking about it from what's in it for me kind of like angle, it actually helps to elevate the conversation, right? And it creates more opportunities for not just yourself, right, but for the people around you as well.
So speaking about LinkedIn and your whole LinkedIn top voice, giving value, do you guys have any tips for people who want to make it out there and improve their personal branding? Do you think that LinkedIn is the way that they should go moving forward? Or do they not have to post on LinkedIn and they can just craft a really excellent resume? Or you think that LinkedIn optimization really helps in their whole overall branding of getting hired?
Oh, I can share first. I think for personal branding, there seems to be two types. I would say internal personal branding, meaning to say within the organization, how your colleagues view you, because they can literally see the work that you do day in and out. And then there's an external personal branding, which you leverage like Instagram and LinkedIn. I would say that personal branding as a whole seems to be quite important. I wouldn't say it's the only thing. I feel like competence is equally important, but then the communication of that competence is also as important. And then that's where this piece comes in, right? So I do know of some colleagues and friends, right, who have kind of gotten ahead in their careers without any like buzz or any noise on LinkedIn. Now, then it got me thinking like, hey, is it really that important to have a personal brand externally, right? So I kind of came to the conclusion that internally you can actually climb the ladder very well without any external personal branding. But then the crux is when you want to make a career switch outside of the company. Some of them who manage to grow very, very fast within the company, they can pivot outside easily because of the title. But then for majority of the people, I think they will still need to leverage some sort of kind of external branding to talk about who they are, especially when they are doing a career pivot that is very different from their current function. So for example, if I want to move from HR into sustainability, then like if I just randomly do, nobody's gonna, they're like why and like what and how and so if I start to already post a little bit of thought leadership, then I can position myself better and to make my switch in future.
Yeah, I really agree with what Kai Ning said about, the whole distinction between internal personal branding and external personal branding, because I feel that nowadays, when a lot of people talk about personal branding, they talk about external personal branding, right? But it's also important to have that very strong internal brand as well, right? And having an internal brand also means, doing good work in where you are at right now, and of course, advocating for yourself to your bosses, your managers, skip levels, even like colleagues in general. general, right? But I think back to your question about the importance of having the external kind of like personal branding, I would say that LinkedIn is just one channel, right? It's definitely not the be all or the end all, even though, LinkedIn is very commonly used like nowadays, right? I've also seen people build very strong personal brands by having, online portfolios, right? Some people write newsletters, some people like create websites, some people are very active on platforms like Twitter, which is now called X, because X also have their very own kind of like active communities as well, right? And then like some people build their personal brands through offline channels, right? Because for industries such as like, manufacturing and, like construction, actually they have one thing I've realized from a client that I work with is that some very, I wouldn't say like traditional industries, but some heavy industries actually have very strong kind of like associations and like chapters where people network with each other, right? So I would say that LinkedIn is just one way in which you can build your own personal brand, but there are also other offline and online channels that people can tap on.
Can I, to add to
Yes.
that, I recall a conversation I had with a mentor recently. So it was very interesting because she gave me a bit of a pivotal shift in my thinking, right? Because as young people, I think we are so like deep in this social media thing that we feel that we are networking well on LinkedIn. If you have a lot of friends and followers, we feel that we are networking well. But my mentor came to me and told me that, if you want to run an event together, you just let me know. If I call like a few of my friends, they will definitely come. Then I was like, wow, like that is true network. When you really have the friendship that goes behind the online image, right? And the friends will do anything for you. So I was like, wow, like how much of these like deep friendships do I have beyond the so-called LinkedIn and general network? Yeah, so it's just a very interesting food for thought that I feel that can only be developed also with some experience. Like they have to go through trials and tribulations together, spend a couple of decades of experience together. Yeah, so but as young people, I think LinkedIn is a good way to start.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, right? Because like last year when I was actually co-authoring a book, we wanted to interview, one senior executive who had a very interesting like career story, right? And one thing I didn't know was that actually another senior executive that we interviewed actually knows like this lady, right? And then, I was just casually like mentioning to him that, I really wanted to speak to this lady, but she's so hard to get. I reached out to her on LinkedIn, I reached out to her on email, and like there was no reply. And one thing that he said really surprised me was like, oh, Gladys, actually, you could have just asked me because I know her really well. And I was just like shocked, right? I think sometimes when we think about personal branding, we don't actually have to do it alone, right? We can leverage on people that we know, people that we already have a connection with to reach out to other interesting people, right, that we may want to reach out to. And having that warm tie at times, right, really helps a lot as well.
Wow, that's really the power of networking. It really helps in not just your internal personal branding, but also your external personal branding if you ever want to do a job switch, career switch. But do you guys have any tips on how I can even network? Because I hear so often that people want to network, they want to go to networking parties, gain connections, go on coffee chats, but they're just an introvert by nature and they don't know where to start. Me included, like I will want a coffee chat with people that I think can really value add me, but then maybe I'm a bit scared to reach out to them or I don't know what to speak to them about. Do you have any tips for people like these who are introverts but yet want to go out of their shell and network with other people?
Actually, I'm highly introverted, so I completely resonate with your
Cannot
point
tell.
of view. Yeah. I'm actually highly introverted, so I completely like resonate with that. I guess one way that worked for me, right, is to find what I'm comfortable with, right? So I think for me, when people talk about networking, they think about large events, conferences, and all, right? But I actually prefer to meet people like one-on-one, right? And so I found that meeting people up like one-on-one, just reaching out to them. I think having that thick skin like really help as well. Like sometimes it just helps to go up to someone and say that, hi, so and so, I saw that you were, working in very interesting kind of like areas. I would like to know more about this. Can I actually like grab a coffee chat with you? I found that actually worked quite well for me. I mean, of course, it isn't like 100% foolproof method of getting like people, right? I mean, some will reply, some won't reply, but I just found that because a lot of people, especially in Singapore and in Asia, they don't ask, right? So when you actually make that ask and you are confident about making the ask, you'll be very surprised at how many people actually like reach out to you, right? And the other thing that I found like worked for me a lot is also about rethinking what networking actually means, right? Because a lot of people know the importance of networking, but networking can also sound very scary. It's like, oh wow, like I have to put myself like out there, right? And okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing it, or maybe like I should be like more careful of doing it, right? But I think it really helped when I reframed my thinking of networking to making connections, right? Just talking to people, right? And I found that the whole idea of making connections, talking to people, putting yourself out there, having just that nice, conversation with people, not expecting too much of it, right? Yeah, really helped like a lot in terms of just reaching out to new and also, existing people that I really want to talk to. Yeah, what about you, Kai Ning?
I think one small step that introverts can take is probably rather than, I wouldn't call myself an introvert. I think I'm somewhat an extrovert, but I still fear, it's just fear of judgment, right? Like when you put all your thought leadership out there or like you write some big chunk of stuff, right? So it's scary to most people. But I think one interesting thing you can do is probably to type little commentaries on people's posts. I think Gladys does that very well as well. So for example, somebody else writes a very good post and you really resonate with it. You just write a comment to say, hey, thanks for the insightful post. What I enjoyed was this and that. So it's a very small way to kind of get the person that you admire to kind of notice me senpai, that kind of vibe, right? So like you kind of like say something and then you form a friendly relationship with the person, right? Then in the end, then you will find out that they are actually conversing with you on their post, right? Then you kind of build a little like relationship over there. That's one piece, right? I think another one is that rather than going out to hunt for people, can we so-called, it's a bit cheesy, but can we like shine our own light and then attract the people that we want to attract to ourselves? I think that might be a more authentic way for many people to look at it, rather than like trying to like go out and like oh, can you meet me for a cup of coffee? Maybe you put one or two like good posts out there to see what are the resonance that you find with other people. That could be one thing. And I think one final thing I wanted to say was that regardless of introverts or extroverts, I think we are all fundamentally just afraid of judgment. But then a lot of people tell me, actually, honestly, nobody cares, right? So like they read like 5 seconds and then they scroll past and they don't think of you ever again. So if you resonate with them, they will give you a like or they will say, oh, interesting. If they think that it's lame, they just scroll past and nobody cares. Yeah. So I think that might be a good way to dispel the fear.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll just add another point. I think at the end of the day, what also helps is to think of the other person as a human being, right? The other person is not better or kind of like worse off than you, right? Because ultimately we are all human beings. We have our own, fears. We have our own likes, dislikes, and all of that, right? So one thing that I really felt helped for me was to also see people as who they are, right? As fellow human beings, just like myself, right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. As an introvert myself, I always had difficulties reaching out to people offline. Online was much easier, you can just comment on LinkedIn, DM them. But then when it's offline, like for example, when you're at a large networking party, it can be a bit difficult. For example, there are two people talking, right? How do you know when to interject the conversation, or what are you supposed to say, like, hi? Or do you guys ever face this kind of problem where you're in a networking party and you don't know who to talk to, or you're just waiting for people to come and talk to you? Or do you have like some tips on how to reach out to someone that's maybe already talking to other people out there? How do you guys make this kind of small talk?
That's a very interesting question, actually. Okay, so for offline networking events, I completely get you because I face that like all the time as well. Actually, one thing that I found super helpful, right, was to actually scan the crowd, right? I think that's one thing that introverts probably do very well, right? Like you scan the crowd, right? And I will look at the interactions that people have with each other first before determining who I should actually kind of like approach, right? So I think for me, for offline kind of like networking events, I will actually look out for people who have had sustained conversations over a period of time, right? Because you kind of know that even if you were to kind of like interject, you would still be talking to like the 2 or 3 people for a period of time, right? And you want that to happen because that's where you get more meaningful insights as compared to you just flittering from table to table, which can be quite exhausting. So, once I have kind of like identified that, okay, these 2 or 3 people seem to have a really good time chatting with each other and they seem to be enjoying the conversation, it doesn't seem to end soon, I will actually confidently like walk up to them, right? And say that, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm from like this, it's been a very good event. Can I join your table, right? I think sometimes it's to just be confident, make that ask. And one thing I've kind of realized is that, especially for large networking events, for conferences, people won't say no. Like, you just have to make the first move. Like, just go out to people, confidently make that ask if you can join the table. And yeah, they will say yes, actually. Yeah. Yeah. And then it's also, like not to be like kind of like embarrassed, right? Because if you feel that, the conversation isn't going like anywhere, you can also politely excuse yourself from the table, right? And say that, oh, it's been very nice meeting the 2 or 3 of you. Yeah, I would like to discover the rest of the event. Yeah, have a good day, right? And then like you just go to another table or another group of people. Yeah.
Do you feel like as an introvert, it's very difficult for you to get out of a group setting if you are getting a bit tired from that conversation? You don't know what to say to get out, to move on to another group? Or even if, as an extrovert yourself, Kai Ning, do you ever face this issue where you don't know what to say to move on from the conversation because it's running dry, you don't really want to be in the conversation anymore, you don't know what to do? Because I always face that, like, I don't know what to say. Do I say I'm going to get water, I'm going to come back? But your tips were really helpful, Gladys, like saying that you have to go off, you want to enjoy the rest of the event. But Kai Ning, how about you? Do you ever face this kind of little networking issue?
Right. Well, I think personally, I have some experience in that, and I've also seen other people doing good work in that space. So I think what happens is sometimes during the conversation between 2 parties, if you want to kind of segue out of it, you can offer to introduce them to someone else. Passing the baton, but not in a bad way. I mean, like in a good way. Because, for example, you say, hey, our conversation is really interesting. I think you would really find value from speaking to this other person. So you act as a connector, and they'll also be happy because a lot of times you may not choose the right person to talk to all the time, like not the accurate person, but maybe they also feel the same about you, right? But maybe you can link them to somebody else who would click more better with them. So they will be happy actually to get handed off to somebody else. That's like one way. Then the other ways are probably just to say, I'm going to check out this other group, or I'm going to get a cup of water, that kind of thing. And frankly, like if you feel that way, I'm sure they also feel that way. So they'll be very happy for the combo to end.
Yeah, agree. But then that said, I would always say that I think just for all our viewers and listeners, right, networking is an art, really. So it takes time to build up that networking superpower, and you won't get it right all the time, right? So it's about persisting at it. It's about putting yourself out there, having the mindset that, it's totally okay if it doesn't work out, because you are not going to click with
everybody.
Yeah. Like, you're not going to click with 100% of people that you meet, right? In fact, I would say that if you click with 50% of people that you meet, it's very good already, right? So there are bound to be some bloopers. There are bound to be situations where you feel uncomfortable and awkward, but that shouldn't deter you from putting yourself out there and making that connection with people.
Yeah, that's so true. We've spoken about how useful networking is in landing a job, personal branding, internal, external, and moving on to other factors about landing the job like resume and cover letter. Do you guys have any quick tips on crafting a good resume? Is it very important for it to be, for example, ATS friendly? I hear a lot about ATS friendly resumes, or is that only specific to certain industries? And at this day and age, is cover letter still important as well? Because at least for me, I have not heard people using cover letter for a while now. And in a lot of my job applications, I always see the line cover letter is not required. So do you guys have any tips on resume and cover letter that you could share with the audience today?
So maybe just one tip that I will talk about, like resumes. Of course, I think Kai Ning and I can probably talk for the whole day about this, right? But I think one thing that a lot of people miss about resumes, right, is a lot of people talk about, resumes must be achievement oriented, they should be ATS friendly. There are many best practices out there, right? I think one very fundamental thing about writing a good resume is being very clear on the jobs that you want first, actually, because a good resume is something that's targeted, right? And a resume can only be targeted if you know where you want to go, right? And if you know what jobs you want to have in mind, right? Because when you are very clear on your target, right, then only will you be able to tease out experiences that you have had in the past, right? Be it personally or professionally, right? That actually showcase the value, right? That you actually bring to the role, right? So maybe let me concretize a bit, right? So let's say, for instance, if you want to maybe say like enter into like, tech sales, right? But in the past, you have had various hats, right? From marketing to HR to sales, right? So then that forces you to take a step back, right? And think, hey, now that I want to go into like tech sales, which of my experiences back in my past position myself well for these tech sales roles, right? And how do I actually like craft it in a way that would speak to hiring managers and recruiters and companies, right? So then that forces you to be very clear and very concise in terms of the experiences that you select and include on your resume, right? Because we all are very multifaceted people, right? We probably have many, experiences and many things that we have done, right? So I think a good resume fundamentally is about showing how your past skills and experiences and expertise addresses what the hiring manager actually wants, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's a great point, and that is quite one of the fundamentals of a good resume. I think a good question to ask yourself with every line that you write, right, would be kind of, if this guy and I did the same exact job, how did I do the job better? Or like, how was I different in my value add? So a lot of times we realize that in the resume, right, people just write what they did. But the thing is that everybody can do the exact same thing, but what was the result and what do you do differently that made you a great employee compared to someone, okay, let's not really compare, but like a great employee, right?
Yeah.
Because let's say like 500 people apply for the job and they're usually from the same similar roles, right, in the past. So then how do you showcase that? So I think that is something to put in mind. And then of course, I would say that for the ATS to not really to beat it, but to kind of meet the expectations, you can always leverage those AI tools. It's a lot easier now. So for example, you can type like, I'm trying to apply for this role. What are some of the keywords that I need to populate in my resume? So that just ensures that you catch the hygiene factors, but then how you phrase it and tell the story is also equally important. Yeah.
I think maybe just one thing to add about the ATS, like part of things, right? I think while having the keywords is important, I've also met a lot of people who get very fixated by like these keywords, right? Like, they just try to keyword stuff everything in the hope that the ATS captures it. I think one very important kind of like tip that we want to share with our listeners and viewers is that while it's important to make it like ATS optimized, it's also very important to fundamentally remember that humans will be reading your resume, right? So I think writing it in a kind of like a very clear, concise and achievement-oriented way without overstuffing on keywords is also very important.
Out of curiosity, we mentioned a lot about keywords and putting in the right keywords in the resume. So what do you think of LinkedIn's Easy Apply? Because it's so easy for you to apply so many things. Like, how is it possible for them to put in the right keywords all the time for different job scopes? And do you think LinkedIn's Easy Apply is something that you would recommend? Or is it something that you have other opinions on? Because personally for me, I know of a lot of people who said things like, I applied for like 100 jobs on LinkedIn, but no one reached out to me. And to me, I personally don't agree with that because it's about the quality, not the quantity after all. You have to tailor each resume to each job description. But if that's the case, then isn't LinkedIn's Easy Apply a bit contradictory to what we're talking about today? Do you guys have any opinions on that? Not sure if you can share because you are LinkedIn's top voice.
Sure. Okay, I won't speak for LinkedIn, on the whole, right? But I think for Easy Apply, I've actually seen very mixed results, right? So of course, traditional job search advice is all about, like quality over quantity, right? Every application that you go for should be targeted and customized. That said, I've also seen clients who have had very good results with LinkedIn Easy Apply, right? So like they just decided to click on Easy Apply, share their profile and resume with the hiring teams. And interestingly, they got callbacks, right? I think one thing to remember about the job search is that oftentimes diversification works, right? So if you really want to land a job in like today's economy, right, it's about trying like various methods, right? Experimenting with them, right? So I wouldn't say to go 100% all in on LinkedIn Easy Apply. I wouldn't say 100% go in on career websites. I wouldn't say 100% go in on referrals and all, right? It usually is a combination of, approaches that will make the most sense, right? Because at the end of the day, different companies have very different hiring styles and mechanisms, right? Some companies look at LinkedIn Easy Apply a lot, actually, right? While some companies prioritize referrals, while some companies screen resumes based on whatever comes from their websites, right? So I would say that having that diversification would actually be very helpful, right? So if you're looking for a job, right, don't just rely on LinkedIn Easy Apply, right? Yeah, there are many ways in which you should probably be trying.
Yeah. I guess sometimes the easier something is, and actually the harder it is to get the good results that you want.
That's true.
Yeah.
With so many people applying via Easy Apply, it seems so easy, right? But then how do you stand out even more?
Yeah.
And actually speaking from personal experience, I realized that some companies really care a lot about the most well-crafted resume. Some companies care a lot about interviews and certain behavioral interviews being answered well. But some companies, like the one I'm at now, cares more about asking you questions that you cannot prepare for to see how you answer there and then at the moment. Not about your resume, not about how well structured your stories are when it comes to behavioral interviews, but just throwing you off the course and then seeing whether you can respond there and then. So I do agree, like maybe different companies just have their own styles when it comes to hiring people.
Yeah, and maybe just to add a point, right? As you interview with companies and as you job search, right, it's not just about the companies selecting you, right, or the companies interviewing you, right? At the same time, it is a two-way street, right? So you also get to select and decide if this company is where you want to be, right? And I think that's something fundamental that a lot of, I would like a lot of people to think about, right, as they job search, right? Because a lot of people think like, now I'm in the hot seat, right? I have to answer all the interview questions perfectly. I have to have a very good resume and all, right? But another important question is to also have fun, right? And also really ask yourself, is this company where I want to work in, right? Is this hiring manager who I want to work with, right? And it's the team who I feel comfortable bringing my best self to work every day. Yeah, so it's also about asking yourself whether or not you see yourself in that position, just as the company is also trying to find a suitable candidate for the role.
Yeah, I think in some sense it's a bit psychological also, because you kind of like put yourself as equals with the company. I think then the vibe, okay, I don't know, like it's a bit cheesy, but the vibe and the energy that you portray is quite different also. It's like when you go into, let's say, the interview, right, rather than saying please take me or like I'll do anything for you, it's rather you are on the same level as the company and you tell the company what you are made of or like what you are, but then you are also evaluating if the company is suitable for you. So I think, like, I don't know, like it just kind of makes both parties equal in a sense, and for some strange reason, it would just work out better for both parties.
Yeah. I agree with Kai Ning, and in fact, I think I wrote a LinkedIn post like sometime back, right, about how actually you are not better or worse off than the other person who's talking to you, right? And I think having that mindset creates that confidence, right, and the enthusiasm to also maybe share a little bit more about yourself that is not, like entirely kind of like polished, right? Just to bring in that little spark, that little creativity, that little kind of like unpolished version of yourself. I found that actually allowed me to have better conversations with companies, right? Yeah.
That's like really interesting, the unpolished version. I think a lot of times we over-prepare. Yeah. Okay, some people under-prepare, but a lot of people over-prepare, like the typical Singaporeans we are, right? And then sometimes it becomes a bit forced and people don't see your true light shine through. And then it actually is to your detriment also, to not show a bit of authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, one thing I realized over the past few years is that going for a job interview or applying for a job is a two-way street, which took me a while to realize, because in the past it was more of like dream job, I want to get this job, please hire me. But then over time it's like, okay, this is my value that I can bring to the table. Do you think that we can work well together? And if I get a rejection, then maybe see it as a redirection to another path instead. Yeah. And speaking about rejections and it being challenges that we have to overcome in our job application and job recruitment process, do you guys have any interesting challenges challenges that you have experienced that you would like to share with our audience today about certain struggles that you had during your 9 to 5 career in the past few years that you have had?
Well, okay, maybe I can start. So I think during the COVID period, I had the opportunity to move to South Korea for 2 years. I think it's a segue to the story I'm going to tell about the challenge, but it was during that period where I felt like I restarted my life or my career in essence, and I was able to be whoever I wanted to be. And then it made me realize that I wasn't who I wanted to be in my career. So I wouldn't call it like a career challenge, but I did realize that I was kind of a lot of us young professionals, right? We limit our potential in a lot of ways. When we go into a company, we try to like conform, or we try to watch very carefully what the senior people are talking, try not to like offend anyone, and be just generally very careful. And I realized that was something that I should have done better. I felt like I wasn't authentic to myself, and I didn't step further into my potential. Yeah, so I felt like I could have done a lot better. And it was only when I stepped into a totally new environment and gave myself a makeover that I realized, hey, actually I'm capable of so much more. Yeah, so I think it's more of a self-imposed challenge that I faced.
Okay. I think for me, it would be the specialist versus generalist like debate, right? Because I think all along, I've always had bosses who tell me things like, oh, Gladys, you really need to think about like specializing in your career, right? So you really need to choose like one single function, right? And I realized that was a problem, right? It didn't really resonate with who I am because I see myself more of a generalist, right? So I think if we look at my career trajectory, I've held roles in various functions, in various industries, even in various like markets as well, right? I think not just in Singapore, but also Thailand and Malaysia. And I realized that, you know what? I don't actually want to become a specialist, right? So I think coming to terms with that, right? And accepting that my career is probably going to be non-linear, accepting that, okay, there will be some people kind of like out there will say that, my resume and my portfolio is very messy, right? And I think being okay with that and being okay with the person that you want to become, like what Kai Ning said earlier, is very important, right? Because at the end of the day, your job search journey and your career is yours, right? It's not like other people's, right? And I think being very comfortable with your own skin, knowing what you want, and also standing up for yourself, right, is something that I struggled with in the past, right, and which I'm more kind of like settled and confident about, right. And I would definitely encourage, everyone here out there to just be like unapologetic about who you want to be, right, and yeah, and I think that will take you further, right, than really conforming to, some other people's beliefs and wishes.
Thanks so much for sharing. It was so nice to have both of you guys on to today's episode. And I'm sure so many of us benefited from all the career tips, resume tips, networking tips that you guys shared in today's episode. Maybe you could share a little bit more about where people can follow you if they want to find out more about the insights that you have, more about the services that you provide as well.
Well, for me, you can definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I mean, yeah, just feel free to key in my full name into LinkedIn, and I look forward to connecting with all of you out there, and feel free to reach out if there's anything I can be of help with.
Right. And for myself, you can find us at the CareerSocius.com. That is the organization name. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm also pretty active. Trying to be more active on LinkedIn. Please follow me. We can be friends there. And I think one last thing, if you don't mind me sharing, would be if all of you young people have your parents who are moving to their second chapter, because I just started an organization called the Courage Chapter to help senior professionals to move into their second chapters. If your parents would like to do some projects and consulting type of roles in their so-called retirement, you can kind of get them to check us out at thecouragechapter.com.
Thanks so much, guys, for sharing in today's episode. And do stay tuned for our next episode on YouTube, Spotify, and whatever channel you're watching us from.
Yeah, so it's been great having all of you here tuning into our podcast. If you like our podcast, please be sure to subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts or comments, do drop them down below.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And that was an episode of In Conversation with YWLC. Hi, everyone. We're from the Young Women's Leadership Connection, YWLC. We are a volunteer-run organization operating on a not-for-profit basis aimed at supporting and nurturing young women aged 21 to 35 in Singapore in their personal and professional lives through mentorship, leadership development, social impact, and networking. Find out more about our community at ywlc.org.sg.